Hi, this is Craig Severance from the Zero Energy Channel. Come join us as we work to address the challenge of moving toward a world with zero energy from fossil fuels. Starting already on the second window, which is not a new window, and it's just a wooden frame, so we don't have any flanges on this, so the installation method is going to be slightly different. Primarily, we'll have to be screwing through the frame into the window rough opening framework to secure it, and we're going to have to install all this nice window flashing tape right away, and because there aren't any flanges to cover, and so he's starting the pan here in the same way. That's the same, and then what's different is going to be the sides. There's no flanges that are involved, and we're going to be taking that flashing tape right up the sides, and as a nice seal on the sides, covering up the Tyvek with it right away. And we'll be doing the flap at the top. It's pretty much the same, and we'll go through a couple more steps, but it's a very similar process, except you have to compensate for there being no flanges to put caulk underneath. So Mike's installing the side window tape, flashing tape, and it starts up underneath the top flap, about 3 inches above the top of the window opening, goes along the side. It does not tuck inside the window for rough opening, and it comes on down like he's doing here, and it ends down there a few inches below. And that's very similar to the way you would do if you had flanges, and you do this over the flanges, but there's no flanges here. So, and we didn't caulk because there's nothing to put the caulk under. Looking at the tape and just realized we didn't cover the top foil, of course, that goes across the top, and it also does not tuck inside the rough opening. It's just on flush to the edge, and it's overlapping both side ones, because what's top has to go above what's below, and it then on the same principle tucks under the Tyvek flap that later comes down over it. It's just so like that, and panning out here on this different window than the main tape here, but the same idea. We have the three sides with the pan in the bottom that keeps the bottom of the windowsill from getting any moisture, and the three sides ready. And here we have the older window, which did require quite a bit of playing around with the shims in order for the windows to open. When the window sat in the window frame the way it looked right, the windows wouldn't open, and so we adjusted the shim until the windows would open really smooth. So older windows are something you're really going to have to be sure of on the mechanisms. But these will open beautifully now, open and close. You want to make sure they close nice and tight with the cranks. So here we are with our first very big passive solar window, one of our older ones, installed with all the shims, and it's not all the way installed yet, but we'll be finishing it out, and we're on our way to having the passive solar tiny house by putting our windows in. And thank you very much, Mike, for all your incredible help today.
It's fun to be here.
The process of shimming is actually remarkably simple, but it seems like destruction for a first timer like myself. You're basically, for these older recycled windows, drilling through, usually with a screw, into the sides of your rough opening from the inside of your frame. Usually you try to find a place that isn't very visible. This one is hidden by the screen when the screen's installed. You can see that screw there, and the screw has to go through the shims. You don't set the screw until you've got it leveled and plumb, and sometimes the windows won't open and close, so you have to make sure that they open and close right. And then you set your screws through the shims, and it can require a lot of playing with it like we had with this window, but we got it right. Got to have the shims there to hold the frame where you want it to be for these older windows, because you do not have the flanges to hold it where you want it to be. So installing the older windows, often tricky is we had to struggle with this to get it so that they would open properly and smoothly, and we did by using the shims that you see sticking out here and there. But of course we're not done, and this is where you see why people who post anything on installing windows pretty much curse these older windows without flanges, because your window opening is a ½ inch each direction more than the framework of the window, so you've got somewhere around 1/4 inch gaps all the way around here. Not always the same distance, of course. So you see, they say, well, what are you going to do? You're going to rely just on caulk to keep the weather out, and without the flanges you're kind of doing that. So we are going to caulk this here on the outside. Not going to rely on the can of foam to keep rain out, but yeah, I'm still going to do that from the inside. But we'll put a good bead of caulk here, but I'm going to put some of this flashing tape over that. Well, we'll just put the flashing tape out about ½ inch, 3/4 inch, so that the siding, which is 3/4 inches thick, should then cover it, and you won't see the silver flashing tape. But it is always a challenge when you're dealing with, but for 75 bucks, I'd rather, for an older window of a huge size, for my south facing, yeah, it was worth it. For these huge seams around, and actually for all the windows I'm using the butyl rubber caulk, which you may never have heard of because the big box lumberyards don't stock it. It's hard to find. Some of the hardware stores stock it. It used to be, when windows were made like this, the preferred caulk, and you can see why. Because it's really sticky, it sticks to itself, and it just doesn't run down. And you can actually form a bead even in these gaps that are. So here I am forming a bead that shouldn't have formed, but because this stuff is so sticky, it did. It also has a really good life, and it's just an excellent caulk. It just isn't being recommended so much anymore. But I found some, and I'm using it for my windows. Oh, and the goat is decided that it looks like a wonderful place to spend the afternoon. I'll have to chase Kid out of there. Anyway. And as I was saying, I was using the butyl rubber, and I also found that since this stuff is so sticky and you don't want to get it on yourself, you can't get it off. It's not water soluble. You can use these broken shims as a good way to, smooth it out without getting it over your hands, if you can try to do that. So you can see here, in order to put another layer of flashing over that caulk, I am literally putting another layer of flashing over that caulk on the outside of the window here by using the same metal flashing tape, offsetting it roughly 3/4 inches toward the window from where the edge of the first tape was that didn't go into the window area. And then, of course, that's going to create the flap that I'm creasing down then over top of the caulk. I let it dry for several days before I did this, because butyl caulk takes a really long time to dry. And it isn't real neat, but I think we're going to be able to cover it up pretty well with the siding, because I'm not really going out here more than the thickness of the siding. If it does, I can easily trim it with a utility knife if it slops over. And it gives me a little more assurance that this is going to be a good rain seal around here. We're doing the sides first, and then we'll do the across the top. So here we are looking at this as we finished it up, ready for just the house siding to be coming up against it. And you can see we aren't just relying upon caulk here. We have covered that with that foil tape. I think we turned the corner and came out about ½ inch to a 3/4. outward from the house, and we're going to then depend upon the siding to cover that. Pretty happy with this window. You can see the windows are open now. It's not November anymore. It's July of the next year, July 2016, where we're finishing this tape and realized we hadn't shot this final look at the window, which is important.
Hello, my name is Eric. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up down below. Also, if you want to subscribe, that's good too. Join us on the Zero Energy channel.